spiders, snakes, the dark, flying, ghosts. Fear is an interesting concept. It's a mental projection in which we imagine ourselves in a situation that we don't want to be in, which isn't actually happening. And what's really funny about fear is that although we do it sort of as a defense mechanism, it really doesn't help. If you're outside in a thunderstorm, being afraid that you're going to get struck by lightning is not going to prevent you from getting struck by lightning. The only thing that's going to prevent you from getting struck by lightning is getting out of the storm and getting to shelter. If you're in an airplane, being afraid that the plane is going to crash is not going to prevent the plane from crashing. And yet, we use fear all the time, as a defense mechanism. I think it has to do with, it's an attempt to control or to have a sense of control in situations when we really don't have any. When we don't have control, we resort to fear as a way of deluding ourselves into thinking that we have control. And what does this have to do with art? Well, quite often, many of us, and I certainly would include myself, find ourselves in situations where we want to make art, but we're afraid to begin. I've been teaching for many, many years, and I see this a lot with students where I'll give them an exercise to do, and they'll sit there and just stare at the blank sheet of paper because they're afraid to begin. And I went through a period many years ago, which I'll talk about in a little bit, where fear of failure was a huge obstacle for me in terms of doing my own work. And when it comes down to being afraid to work, having fear preventing us from beginning to make a work of art, what it really has to do with is that we're afraid that the work we do is not going to meet our expectations. We have expectations of what we want the work to be. Maybe we just want it to be good. Maybe we want someone to buy it. We want it to be brilliant. And we're afraid that it's not going to be. And that really comes back to what I just said about being in control. It's because a lot of the elements that go into making a work of art are beyond our control. Maybe we don't have enough skill yet. Maybe we're trying to do something creative and original. And part of what we do is left to chance and serendipity. And so we really don't know what the final outcome is going to be. And so there is that fear that the work that we produce will not meet our expectations. And that can easily be seen as a failure. But the reality is, it's not a failure at all. If you're trying to make art, the only way to learn how to do it is to do it. And that means making a lot of bad drawings and a lot of bad paintings. You may have to make 100 or 1,000 terrible paintings before you start making good ones. And so you just have to accept that and make those bad paintings. So if you make a painting or a drawing or whatever medium you're working in, and you're not happy with it, it doesn't meet your expectations, don't look at that as a failure. Look at that as one fewer bad paintings or bad drawings that you have to do. And so really it's a success. It's a step in the right direction. You're working toward getting to the point where you have more control over your medium and you do better work. And so making those pictures that don't succeed, that don't convey whatever it is we were trying to communicate through the work, are really an important part of the process. And yet that fear can often get in the way and prevent us from working. If you're playing a musical instrument and you're trying to learn a new piece of music, in the beginning you have to practice, because when you first attempt to perform the piece of music, if it's new, it could be difficult. There may be certain parts that require you to figure out what the proper fingering is. There might be certain passages that are difficult for you to articulate. And so you play the music with mistakes, with errors, with problems in the timing, the pitch, whatever, and you practice and you keep playing it over and over again until you can do it correctly. And those practice attempts, those performances that you do of the piece of music that have mistakes in them are not failures. They're not failed performances. They're just part of the learning process. And making art is exactly like that. You have to make a lot of bad pictures. And so the best thing to do when you want to begin a work of art is to just get in there and start working. And don't worry about the outcome. If the drawing or the painting doesn't come out the way you wanted it to, do another one. Start over. Maybe you have to do 5, or maybe you have to do 500 drawings to do, whatever it is you were trying to do. But being afraid to start isn't going to help. And as I said earlier, fear never prevents the thing that we're afraid of from happening. So if you're staring at a blank canvas because you're afraid to begin, because you're afraid that the painting is going to be a disaster, being afraid and looking at the blank canvas is not going to help you to figure out how to make a good painting. The only way you're going to learn how to make a good painting is to make a painting, do the best you can, and if it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, then try to figure out why and do another one. Start again. And if you're doing something creative, if you're trying to do really creative, original work, as many of us are, there's no template for you to model your work after. You're trying to do something that's never been done before. You certainly risk failure because you don't have a model. It's like if you're climbing a mountain and there's a trail there where someone's gone and painted blue lines on the rocks or whatever, and you're following the trail to the summit. It may require a certain level of strength and skill and agility and stamina to get to the summit, but at least there is a trail there. You know the way to the top, and it's just up to you to do it. But doing creative, original work is more akin to being the first person to summit a mountain where there is no trail. And you may find that you go off in a certain direction and realize that you cannot get to the summit that way, and then you have to turn back. And that's not a failure. That's just part of the process of finding the way to the top. And art is the same way, So you have to allow those bad paintings and bad drawings to be part of your process and embrace them. Make them. Do the work. Don't just sit there and stare at the blank sheet of paper and be afraid that you're not going to succeed. Also, I think what happens with a lot of people, and this certainly happened with me, is that we can see the failure of the work to meet our expectations as a reflection on us. I tried to make a drawing of a fish. It doesn't look like a fish. So I'm not a good artist. I'm a bad person. I'm a terrible artist. I don't know how to draw. I mean, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that way. I went through a period about 20 years ago where I had taken up art again seriously after a bit of a hiatus where I was focused more on playing music, and I started painting again. And I had many days, many nights where I was afraid to go into the studio. And what it really came down to was I didn't want to face my own inabilities. I did not want to face my lack of skill. I didn't want to accept that. And ultimately, I had to embrace that. I mean, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to continue working. And so I realized that embracing my deficiencies, embracing those things that I couldn't do, was the first step in learning how to master them. Realizing that you can't do something is the first step that you have to take in order to get to the point where you can do it. You first have to accept the fact that I can't do this. So what do I do now? What do I have to do to get to the point where I can do this thing that right now is beyond my capabilities? And so, embracing those failures and those deficiencies is an important part of the process, and it's how we learn. And even today, many years later, the fear demon is still out here in the studio, and we have kind of a amicable relationship at this point. I come out here every day to work, and the demon's over there in the corner. You again, Frank, really? You think you're gonna make art? Really? You realize that last picture you made, that was just luck. And to me now, it's just like a fly buzzing around in the room. It's just background noise, and I ignore it, and I just get to work. And of course, when I make a drawing or a painting that doesn't succeed in the way that I wanted it to, of course, the demon speaks up right away. See, I told you, you are useless. And again, I just ignore it. Interestingly, the demon is awfully quiet when I do succeed. He never has anything to say when I make good pictures. But it's there. I just ignore it. I don't know that it will ever go away. And that's really what you have to do. See that the fear is there. See that there is that fear of failure when you begin to work. Just accept it as part of the process and get in there and do the work. And if the picture doesn't meet your expectations, start over. Do another one. Maybe you need to learn more. Maybe you need to develop some technique. Maybe you need to get some feedback. But just figure out what it is you need to do to make better work. But being afraid to work is never going to be the answer. It's never going to help you to find the solution to do good work. You just have to do the work. So that's it for today. I'm Frank in the studio. Don't be afraid to work. Just work. And have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.